All right, buckle up, or actually don't, because where we're going, there are no seatbelts, no suspension systems, no lumbar support, and absolutely no heated seats. There's just wood, leather, mud, and a man named Gerald who hasn't bathed since September. But before we get there, let me introduce you to the star of today's little history lesson. His name is Tyler. Tyler James Whitmore, 22 years old, born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona, in the kind of suburb where every house looks the same. Every lawn is aggressively green despite being in a literal desert, and every kid grows up believing that a 10-minute wait at In-N-Out constitutes a genuine hardship. Tyler's mom drove him to school until he was 17, not because she had to, because he asked her to, because the bus smells weird. That's the origin story, folks. That's our protagonist. Tyler currently lives in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe, which he shares with a roommate he communicates with exclusively through sticky notes and the passive-aggressive art of leaving dishes in the sink. His half of the apartment is a museum of modern American excess. There's a Dyson fan that cost $350, pointed directly at his gaming chair, which itself cost $420 and has a lumbar pillow, a headrest, and RGB lighting that cycles through colors based on his mood settings. He has a skincare routine that is, and I need you to understand this, 14 steps. 14, there's a cleanser, a toner, 2 serums, one for the morning, one for the evening, a vitamin C treatment, an eye cream that he applies with his ring finger because the ring finger applies the least pressure. It's just science, bro. A moisturizer, an SPF layer, a mist, a weekly exfoliant, a monthly clay mask, a monthly enzyme peel, a lip treatment, and something called a facial gua sha session that takes 9 minutes and involves a cold jade stone and a YouTube tutorial he's watched 47 times. This is a man who has never, not once in his adult life, gone to bed without washing his face. We are about to change that. His morning routine? And yes, we are going to sit here and appreciate this for a moment. Because it matters, begins at 11 a.m. Not because Tyler works late or has any particular reason to be up at 11. He just doesn't set alarms. Alarms stress me out, he told his mom during their weekly FaceTime call, and his mom said, "Okay, baby," because that is the society we have constructed. By 11:15, he's on his phone, not getting up, not moving. Just lying in his memory foam mattress that's somehow both soft and supportive, scrolling through TikTok with the focus and dedication of a neurosurgeon. He watches cooking videos, gym videos, romanticize your life videos, and at least one video per day about someone doing something impressive that makes him briefly consider changing his life before he closes the app and orders DoorDash. By noon, he's made it to the bathroom. Skincare starts. By 12:30, he's in the kitchen, but only to grab the cold brew that he prepped the night before. Not because he's a morning person, but because he read that cold brew has less acidity and his gut health journey is very important to him right now. He has a therapist. He has a gut health journey. He has a meditation app that he opens once a week and immediately closes because 10 minutes feels like a lot. He is 22 years old and he is the apex predator of comfort. On the particular day that everything goes sideways, Tyler is sitting cross-legged on his gaming chair at 1:15 in the afternoon, wearing a Scottsdale high hoodie, joggers, and slides with socks, a choice he considers fashion-forward and the rest of us consider a cry for help. He's doing what he does on most afternoons, scrolling Reddit while eating a grain bowl from a meal kit service he subscribed to during a moment of self-improvement that has since faded into the background like a gym membership in February. He stumbles across a thread in our vintage travel about a newly released app called Royal Roots, 1840 edition. The Post describes it as the most immersive historical travel simulation ever created, with AI-generated Victorian England visuals, atmospheric soundscapes, and what the developer calls genuine discomfort mechanics, designed to simulate the experience of traveling England by Royal Mail coach in the early Victorian era. The Post has 14,000 upvotes. The comments say things like, "This app broke my brain and I uninstalled it after 3 minutes and I have a PhD in history." Tyler, who does not have a PhD in history and whose knowledge of the Victorian era begins and ends with a Peaky Blinders episode he watched on Netflix, thinks this sounds hilarious. He downloads it immediately. The app loads with a sepia filter and the sound of horses. Tyler thinks it's low-key fire. He clicks through the prompts without reading them. Terms of service? Skipped. Consent to full sensory immersion protocol? Skipped. Warning about temporal displacement side effects? Skipped. There's a big button that says accept journey, and Tyler, with his cold brew halfway to his mouth, clicks it and says, "Let's go, bestie," to nobody in particular. The screen goes white, then the screen goes black. Then Tyler's phone drops out of his hand, not because he dropped it, but because his hand is suddenly not where his phone was. His apartment is gone. The grain bowl is gone. The RGB lighting is gone. The $350 Dyson fan is gone. The skincare products lined up on his bathroom shelf, like little soldiers of self-care, are absolutely devastatingly gone. Tyler is standing in a field in Yorkshire, England. It is October 14th, 1840. It is 6:30 in the morning. It is 41 degrees Fahrenheit. It is raining. Now, let's take a moment, because Tyler's first conscious experience of 1840 England is the smell, and I want you to really sit with this. The year is 1840. There is no municipal sewage system. There is no deodorant. Well, there's no commercially available deodorant. That won't exist for another few decades. There are horses everywhere, and where there are horses, there is what horses leave behind. The road Tyler is standing next to, and calling it a road is generous. It's more of a shared understanding between people and mud that travel might occasionally happen here is a dark, sucking, deeply committed mud that has absorbed centuries of rain, horse traffic, animal waste, and the general suffering of the English peasantry. The air smells like wet hay, manure, wood smoke, and something Tyler's brain is desperately trying to categorize and failing. He stands there for approximately 4 seconds before he gags. "Bro," Tyler says to the open sky. "What the actual..." And then a horse nearly walks into him because the road is not wide, the horse is enormous, and the coachman driving the thing has the situational awareness of a man who has been awake since 3 a.m. and has been doing this job for 22 years and has never once been asked to watch out for a confused kid from Scottsdale in a Scottsdale high hoodie standing in the middle of the King's Road. Tyler jumps sideways into the mud. His slides with socks, his fashion-forward footwear choice sink immediately and completely into 4 inches of cold October mud. He looks down. He looks at the sky. He says, "No, no, 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 no," in the voice of a man who has just understood deep in his soul that the day is not going to go the way he planned. This is the Royal Mail coach route from York to London, 204 miles, roughly 24 hours of travel time, assuming no broken wheels, no lame horses, no washed out sections of road, no highwaymen, and no acts of God. And God in 1840 England was an active participant in the daily misery of the traveling public. The coach that Tyler is supposed to board, and I say supposed to because the app apparently booked him a seat, which is more functionality than Tyler deserves, is the York High Flyer, a Royal Mail coach that departs at 7 a.m. sharp. Royal Mail coaches did not wait. Not for weather, not for passengers, not for a 22-year-old from Arizona who is currently crying quietly into his hoodie sleeve because his socks are wet. The coachman, a man of about 50 named Thomas Baxter, who has the complexion of someone who has spent 3 decades being hit in the face by wind, rain, and the general hostility of the British climate, looks at Tyler the way you'd look at a pigeon that somehow got inside your house. Confused, mildly irritated, deeply unwilling to engage with the situation but professionally obligated to do so. Tyler climbs onto the coach, or rather, Tyler attempts to climb onto the coach because Royal Mail coaches of 1840 had an inside and an outside. The inside, the enclosed cabin, held 4 passengers, pressed together like human sardines on leather benches so narrow and hard that modern orthopedic surgeons would classify them as instruments of spinal torture. The outside meant sitting on top of the coach, exposed to the elements, gripping a rail with both hands, while the coach barreled down roads that were genuinely trying to kill everyone on them. Tyler, who got the last available inside seat, should theoretically be grateful. He is not grateful. He is sitting between a wool merchant from Leeds named William, who is large, damp, and smells of lanolin and pipe tobacco, and a woman named Mrs. Hartley, who is traveling to see her sister in Nottingham, and who has brought in a cloth bag something that Tyler's nose is identifying as food, but his brain is refusing to fully process. The 4th passenger is a young clerk named Arthur, 19 years old, pale, thin, and already car sick before the coach has moved 20 feet. The inside of the coach is approximately 4 feet wide. 4 passengers. Do the math. Tyler's shoulder is pressed against William the wool merchant's shoulder. William's coat is made of thick, itchy wool and is wet from the rain and is warming Tyler's arm in a way that Tyler finds profoundly violating. The bench is wood with a thin leather pad. The leather is old, cracked, and cold. The coach smells like every person who has ever sat in it, layered across years, combined with horse mud and whatever Mrs. Hartley has in that bag. Tyler's trying to breathe through his mouth. Arthur the clerk is already a delicate shade of gray. William has produced a pipe and is beginning the process of lighting it in the enclosed space, which has exactly 1 small window on each side, both currently closed against the rain, creating what can only be described as a rolling smoke chamber on wheels that is now in motion, bouncing along the road to York at a speed that feels both thrillingly fast and utterly uncontrolled. Bro. He's been in the coach for 11 minutes and he's already asked William if there's any way to crack the window. And William looked at him the way you'd look at someone who just asked if they could crack the window during a November morning in Yorkshire in 1840, which is to say with the complete compassionate bafflement of someone encountering a new category of stupidity. The window went down half an inch. Tyler took a breath of air that was mostly rain and smelled distantly of road. He considered this a victory. He was not ready for what came next. 20 minutes out of York, the road, which had been bad, became worse. You have to understand what road travel in 1840 actually meant. The Turnpike Trust roads were the better ones, maintained by private companies who charged tolls and used the money to fill potholes, grade surfaces, and install drainage. The York to London route used sections of these, but also sections of what were basically just grooves worn into the earth by repeated use. And the transition between the two was felt viscerally in the spine of every passenger. The coach didn't bounce. It lunged. It dropped. It recovered. It did things that no vehicle should do while still technically moving forward. Mrs. Hartley seemed completely unaffected, having done this journey several times and calibrated her body to it the way you calibrate to turbulence after enough flights. William was asleep, actually asleep, upright with the pipe still going, head rolling slightly with each lurch in a way that suggested his body had long since made peace with Victorian road conditions. Arthur the clerk was pale green. Tyler was gripping the door handle with both hands and making a sound that wasn't quite words but conveyed unmistakably the sentiment of a person whose entire framework for what travel means has been structurally demolished. At 8:15 in the morning, they stopped at the first coaching inn for a horse change. This is something Tyler had no framework for. The idea that a journey requires multiple sets of horses, swapped out every 8 to 12 miles at purpose-built inns along the route, each inn maintaining a stable of horses specifically for this rotation, with grooms ready to uncouple the tired animals and replace them in under 2 minutes so the Royal Mail schedule could be maintained. This is elegant, honestly. This is a pre-industrial logistics network that is, in its own way, genuinely impressive. Tyler did not find it impressive. Tyler found the 2-minute stop deeply upsetting because he had just climbed out to use the facilities, meaning a wooden outhouse behind the inn that was not, by any definition Tyler would have recognized, a facility. And now the coachman was calling to reboard, and Tyler was standing outside the outhouse saying, "Wait, 1 second," and Thomas Baxter, the coachman, was saying absolutely nothing and tightening the reins because the Royal Mail did not negotiate with passengers who needed another second. Tyler ran, in his mud-soaked slides, across a cobblestone yard. He made it. He fell into the coach sideways and landed half in Mrs. Hartley's lap, and Mrs. Hartley, who was a woman of her era and therefore possessed of a dignity that could withstand nearly anything, simply straightened her hat and said, quite in the tone of a woman who has seen everything. Tyler, with mud on his hoodie and whatever was on that outhouse floor on his slide, sat back down and stared at the wall of the coach and did the breathing thing his therapist taught him for moments of acute stress. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold 4 counts. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. William watched him do this with the open, uncomplicated curiosity of a man who has never heard of a therapist and would not understand the concept if you explained it. Arthur the clerk, who had been sick out the window approximately 20 minutes prior, was somehow worse than Tyler. They were, in their misery, briefly bonded. Breakfast happened at the second stop, just past Doncaster, at a coaching inn called the Crown. This is the moment I've been waiting for, Tyler, who starts every day with either a cold brew and a grain bowl or an acai smoothie with almond butter, walked into a coaching inn breakfast room at 9:30 in the morning in 1840 and was presented with the following options. Bread. Not artisan bread, not sourdough, not the kind of bread with seeds and a crust that requires actual jaw strength and comes in a paper bag from a farmer's market. Bread that is dense and slightly gray and made with flour that has been milled in a way that occasionally leaves small bits of stone in it, because millstone grinding in 1840 was not a perfect process, and occasionally your bread had a literal pebble in it which you just dealt with. There was also a bowl of porridge. The porridge had no brown sugar, no maple syrup, no oat milk, no berries arranged on top in an aesthetic spiral. It was oats, water, and salt, cooked until it achieved a texture somewhere between paste and cement, served hot enough to burn your mouth, but cooling rapidly in the drafty inn room. There was small beer in the morning because the water supply was unreliable and weak beer was genuinely safer to drink than most well water in 1840 England. And there was a hard-boiled egg. Tyler stood at the counter and asked, with the earnest optimism of a man who has not yet accepted his situation, whether they had, like anything else, maybe some fruit or yogurt. The innkeeper's wife, a woman of about 40 named Agnes, who had been up since 4 in the morning, baking that dense gray bread and stirring that porridge over a fire that she'd had to rebuild from coals, looked at Tyler the way you look at someone who has just said something in a language you don't speak, but have nevertheless correctly identified as rude. There was no yogurt. There was no fruit. There was bread, porridge, small beer, and an egg. Tyler ate half the bread and 3 spoonfuls of the porridge and pushed the bowl away with an expression of personal offense. Agnes watched him push the bowl away with the expression of someone who has fed 7 children on this exact porridge and has thoughts about waste that she is professionally restraining herself from sharing. Tyler left 2 of his 4 allotted shillings on the counter. The app had apparently preloaded him with period currency, which is honestly the one thing it did right, and went back to the coach. Here's what Tyler did not appreciate, sitting on his hard leather bench with his sad porridge in his stomach, staring out at the English countryside, rolling past in the rain. This coach was moving at approximately 10 miles per hour on good road, and closer to 6 or 7 on bad. It was covering the York to London route in roughly 22 to 24 hours, with stops. This was considered, in 1840, extraordinarily fast. This was engineering and logistics and animal husbandry working together at the absolute peak of what pre-rail travel could achieve. 12 years earlier, this same journey had taken 2 or 3 days. In 100 years, it would take 2 hours by plane. In Tyler's actual life, it was a 2-hour flight that he found inconvenient if there was no Wi-Fi. The entire arc of human progress right here in this terrible carriage. Tyler did not contemplate any of this. Tyler was trying to find a comfortable way to sit on a 4-inch leather pad over a wooden bench and had concluded, after 45 minutes of experimentation, that no such way existed. By midday, Tyler's back hurt in a way that he had never previously experienced. He was familiar with the kind of back discomfort that comes from sitting in a gaming chair for 6 hours, which is a mild ache that a 10-minute stretch in a heating pad resolved completely. This was different. This was the kind of pain that comes from a wooden bench with no give, no lumbar support, and no adaptation for the human spine, combined with a road surface that transmitted every bump and rut directly upward through the bench and into every vertebra simultaneously. He was shifting every few minutes. He had tried sitting forward. He had tried sitting back. He had tried sitting at an angle. William the wool merchant was still asleep, somehow impossibly deeply asleep, and Tyler hated him with a pure, clean, uncomplicated hatred. Arthur the clerk had recovered enough to produce a small book and was reading with the focused determination of someone who had accepted his circumstances and decided to make use of them. Tyler had no book. Tyler had no phone. Tyler had nothing but the view through a fogged window and the thoughts in his own head, which had never in 22 years of life been asked to sustain him for more than about 4 minutes at a time without external input. This is the part nobody tells you about pre-modern travel. It wasn't just physically uncomfortable, it was profoundly, existentially boring in a way that modern humans genuinely cannot prepare for. Tyler had never been alone with his thoughts for longer than the time it takes to walk from his car to a building. His brain, accustomed to a constant stream of TikToks, texts, Spotify playlists, YouTube videos, Discord notifications, and the background hum of his phone existing in his pocket as a potential portal to any stimulus he might want at any moment, was now running on empty in a moving box with 3 strangers and no signal. He stared out the window at the English countryside. The English countryside in October in the rain is beautiful if you have the context to appreciate it. The green fields, the stone walls, the villages with their church steeples rising through low cloud. Tyler had no context. Tyler saw fields and more fields, and what looks like more fields but wetter. He counted the mile markers. He tried to remember song lyrics. He thought about his apartment. He thought about his cold brew. He thought about the grain bowl he'd been eating when this started and felt a grief for it that was disproportionate but completely sincere. At 2 in the afternoon, the first crisis occurred. The road descended into a shallow valley where a small river had flooded its banks and spread across the track in a sheet of brown water about 30 meters wide and of unknown depth. The coachman, after consulting with a local farmer who happened to be standing nearby with the patient, weather-worn expression of a man who has watched coaches attempt this crossing before, decided to proceed slowly. The horses went in. The water came up to the axles. The coach slowed. It tilted slightly to the right. There was a rut on the right side of the track, submerged, invisible. The left rear wheel came partially out of the water on the opposite side of the rut as the right wheel dropped into it. And for approximately 6 seconds, everyone inside the coach experienced the very specific, very Victorian sensation of not being sure whether they were going to make it across. Mrs. Hartley clutched her bag. Arthur made a sound like a small bird. William opened one eye and then closed it again, having assessed the situation as non-fatal. Tyler, who had been almost asleep, lurched awake as the coach tilted, grabbed William's arm with both hands and said at full volume, "Are we flipping? Oh my God, are we flipping?" And then the wheel came out of the rut and the coach leveled and they were through. Tyler was still holding William's arm. William looked down at the hands. Tyler let go. Nobody said anything. The coach continued. The afternoon dissolved into a long, gray, lurching procession through the Midlands. The stops became Tyler's only landmarks. The horse changes, the brief stretches of leg outside coaching inns, the food that was always some variation of bread and something gray, and occasionally a piece of cold meat that Tyler could not identify and was afraid to ask about. He ate it anyway. By 4 in the afternoon, he was hungry enough that he'd eaten everything put in front of him without the editorial commentary he'd been providing all morning. Hunger, it turns out, is a remarkable food critic. The bread started tasting like bread. The gray meat tasted like protein. He finished Arthur's leftover portion when Arthur wasn't looking, and Arthur, who was too polite to say anything, watched this happen, with the blank acceptance of a man who has decided to simply document the experience rather than engage with it. Night fell around 5:30, which is what night does in England in October, abruptly and without sentiment. The coach lamps, actual oil lamps, burning whale oil, hung on brackets at the front of the coach, visible as small orange smears through the window, provided approximately enough light to confirm that there was a road and that they were still on it. Inside the coach, there was nothing. No light, no phone screen. Tyler sat in the dark listening to the horses, the wheels, William snoring, and the rain, which had been going since morning and showed no sign of reconsidering. It was the most profoundly dark and silent environment he had ever experienced in his life. Not dark like the power went out. Dark like the darkness before electricity was a concept. Dark like the world was simply not lit. He couldn't see his own hands. He reached up and touched his face to confirm he still had one. He slept eventually, not well. The bench, the cold, the noise of the road, the occasional lurch, all of these woke him repeatedly, and each time he woke, he had a half second of thinking he was in his apartment before the smell of the coach, the darkness, and William's shoulder against his brought it back. He slept in increments of 15 minutes, woke, adjusted, slept again. By midnight, somewhere in Northamptonshire, he had achieved a kind of exhausted semi-consciousness that he'd never touched before, not quite sleeping, not quite awake, just existing in a body that had nothing left to protest with and had resigned itself to the situation. Arthur the clerk had fallen properly asleep, head against the window, breath fogging the glass. Mrs. Hartley sat with extraordinary posture in the dark, possibly asleep, possibly just existing with the self-contained composure of a Victorian woman who had made peace with everything. William snored, the horses ran on. By 3 in the morning, the rain had stopped. The road surface had improved. They were on better turnpike road now, closer to London, and the coach was moving faster, and the motion had changed from a painful lurching to a rhythmic rolling that was almost comfortable. Tyler, who had been awake for most of the last 4 hours, pressed his forehead to the cold window glass and looked out. The clouds had cleared in patches, and there were stars, more stars than Tyler had ever seen. Because there was no light pollution, no city glow, no ambient electric light of any kind. Just the stars, dense and cold and indifferent, above the dark English fields. He stared at them for a long time. He had no thought that the narrating voice here would describe as particularly profound. He mostly thought about how his neck hurt. But he looked at them. He really looked at them. Because there was nothing else to look at and nowhere else to be. And somewhere in there in the dark, moving south through a world without electricity or indoor plumbing or Postmates or any of the infrastructure of his life, he looked at the stars for probably 20 minutes straight. And that is something he had never done before and would not do again once he was home. Dawn happened at 6:15, gray, thin, cold, beautiful in the way English autumn dawns are beautiful if you have survived the night to see them. They were in Hertfordshire now, the road smooth, the horses fresh from the last change, and the outskirts of London beginning to resolve through the coach window. First as a smudge of smoke on the horizon, then as buildings, then as streets, then as the full, overwhelming, astonishing, horrifying reality of London in 1840. Tyler had been to New York twice. He thought he understood cities. He did not understand this. London in 1840 had 1 million people. It was the largest city in the world, and it existed entirely without the infrastructure that makes a city of 1 million people possible in the modern sense. No underground pipes carrying clean water to every building, no sewers carrying waste away. No garbage collection in any meaningful sense. No electric light. No central heating. The coal smoke, every house, every factory, every forge and bakery and workshop burning coal for heat and power, had settled into a permanent layer above the city, yellow-gray, dense, smelling of sulfur and soot, visible from miles away as a stain on the morning sky.
No.
Tyler pressed his face to the window and said very quietly, "What is that smell?" And Mrs. Hartley, who was awake and had been watching London approach with the comfortable recognition of someone returning to familiar territory, said, "London, dear," with the complete, unself-conscious normality of someone for whom this was simply the smell of their city. The coach arrived at the General Post Office in St. Martin's-le-Grand at 7:43 in the morning, 3 minutes ahead of schedule, which Thomas Baxter, the coachman, achieved with the understated pride of a man whose entire professional identity is organized around punctuality. Tyler climbed out of the coach into a London street in 1840 and stood on the cobblestones in his mud-destroyed slides, his hoodie now wearing 24 hours of coach travel, his hair doing things it had never done without a hair routine, and looked around at the city surrounding him. The streets were full. It was morning, it was a weekday, and the city was at work, costermongers pushing carts. Boys running messages, horses everywhere, and again the smell. Workmen in heavy coats, women in bonnets. The sound of it, iron wheels on cobblestone, horse hooves, voices calling, bells from a nearby church. The distant clang of something industrial was immense and layered and nothing like anything Tyler's ears had been trained on. He stood there for about 30 seconds. Then the app glitched, or whatever the mechanism was, whatever technology or magic or narrative convenience was running this whole situation. And the screen in his apartment blinked back on. Tyler was in his gaming chair. The grain bowl was on the desk. The cold brew, half finished, had gone watery. The Dyson fan hummed. The RGB lighting cycled through blue and green and pink and sat on pink, because apparently his mood setting was pink, which under the circumstances felt accurate. He sat there for a while. Then he went and took a shower, a long one, with the hot water all the way up, standing under it and not moving for about 10 minutes and thinking about nothing, or trying to. He used all 14 skincare steps. He ordered DoorDash, a grain bowl, an acai smoothie, a cold brew. He sat on his gaming chair and waited for the food to arrive, which took 34 minutes. And when the DoorDash notification said, "Your order is 8 minutes away," he thought about how 8 minutes, in the grand context of things, was nothing, was less than nothing, was a number so small as to be almost insulting in its smallness. He thought about 204 miles and 24 hours in the rain. He thought about the stars in Northamptonshire. He thought about William asleep against him in the dark. When the food arrived, he tipped 40%. He's still not sure why. He just did. Welcome back, Tyler. You lasted 24 hours without Wi-Fi, without AC, without a single functioning skincare product, without hot water, without door-to-door delivery, without a mattress, without a single algorithm curating your experience. You ate gray porridge. You got rained on. You shared a bench with a man who smelled of sheep. You were briefly, genuinely not sure if the coach was going to flip into a flooded road in Northamptonshire. You looked at more stars than you've seen in your entire life. You survived. And tonight, Tyler, when you climb into that memory foam mattress with the temperature-regulating sheets and the white noise machine on your phone, and you open TikTok and the first video is someone doing a GRWM for a road trip with a ring light and a latte, I want you to think about what you know now that you didn't know yesterday. I want you to think about Thomas Baxter, age 50, driving through the night in October for the 22nd year in a row, maintaining a schedule that 1,000,000 letters and the entire postal system of England depended on. I want you to think about Agnes at the Crown, up at 4 in the morning to make bread. I want you to think about the clerk Arthur, reading his book in the dark of a moving carriage, making the most of 14 minutes of daylight. I want you to think about all of it. And then I want you to appreciate, not performatively, not for the TikTok you're absolutely going to make about this, actually quietly, personally appreciate the DoorDash app and the hot shower and the paper you will use in the bathroom tonight that nobody in that coach had access to in any form. Gratitude, Tyler, it's not a vibe, it's infrastructure.